Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Michele Gold, the board chair of the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's program. We are very fortunate to have with us a human rights advocate and accomplished public speaker, Dydine Umunyana. Dydine is a child survivor of the Rwandan Genocide against the Tutsis and the author of Embracing Survival. In 2013, she was appointed as Youth Peace Ambassador for the Aegis Trust, which is an organization dedicated to the prevention of genocide and mass atrocities worldwide. In 2015, she became a global mentor for Peace at Serve to Unite, an organization that cultivates peace through creative service learning and global engagement. Dydine is committed to establishing a dialogue between people for understanding their shared histories and cultural differences. Through her writing and public lectures, her goal is to pierce the wall of silence that still pervades much of our society. Dydine will answer audience questions towards the end of the program, so if you have a question, please click on the Q&A and type your questions there. Dydine, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Can you please give us a little background on the history of Rwanda and the ethnic tensions between the Hutu and the Tutsis, so we will be better able to understand your family's experience during the 1994 genocide?
Briefly, in 1820s, when the colonials were still living in Rwanda, they gave privileges to the elite class, the Tutsis. But when they were doing the studies, it was not just the study. They also told my people that the Tutsis, they look more lighter, they have lighter skin, they're smart. They might be from Ethiopia, from East Africa, closer to Europe. And so when the Hutus heard that, in their minds that the Tutsis were not from Rwanda, and they are the elite class, they have everything in the land that is not theirs, it's not their home. So the conflict really started from there. In 1950s, the colonials switched favors. And then they gave the favor to the Hutus, and the Hutus were already angry at the Tutsis, that the Tutsis have been having everything in the land that is not theirs. So that's where the civil war started. They started killing people. A lot of Tutsis fled to neighboring countries. And that the few that left in Rwanda, including my family, my grandparents, they lived in fear for so many years. So really my personal journey starts when I was born in the 90s, but the conflict was already there. That took 3 or 4 decades to explode in 1994.
Thank you, and I think this is a good time to segue into asking you if you could please explain what happened to your family in the early 1990s leading up to the 1994 genocide.
Oh, yeah.
It's a complex question, I'm sure.
I will try and give a clear answer or a history, my personal history. My in late, I think in 90s, that's when the Tutsis who fled to neighboring countries, they formed a rebel group that was called RPF, which is the group that stopped the genocide in 1994. But that group started in Uganda, and it started because they were not accepted in those countries. They were not accepted as citizens of those neighboring countries, Congo, Burundi, Uganda, and Tanzania. So they were always refugees. They were a lot of their children were born there, but they were still refugees in those countries. So they always craved to go back to their home, which was Rwanda. But the Tutsis who were living in Rwanda, they were being killed, they were being sent to jail. There was so much propagandas. They were not humans. They were treated, there were a lot of name callings. There were cockroaches, there were snakes. So I think the neighbors, I wasn't born yet, but what I've learned and from my family and my friends is that they were not treated as humans. And the radios, the speech that was going on within the country was that being a Tutsi was almost like being born with a sin. You know, you did something wrong to be born as a Tutsi person. So in early 1990, my father, who was in his 20s, who was young, because when the genocide was being planned and prepared, the government used to kill young people who seemed to fight back because they wanted it to really succeed. So my parents were they were young, they were not demographic, that was a target. My dad fled the country right after I was born. And then he joined the RPF. My mother joined the RPF right after my baby brother was born. So because we're a target, they left us at our grandparents. So I was pretty much raised by my grandparents, which I thought they were my parents because I never knew my actual parents. But when the genocide happened, I was living at my grandparents' home. So that's pretty much the brief history of before the genocide. And then during my life before the genocide, which was a beautiful life. My grandpa loved me so much. You know, I was a spoiled grandkid. But everything changed, you know, during the genocide. I was very, very young. But the fear and the fear created in that little girl, which was me and all my other cousins, I remembered a few things. I don't really remember everything that happened during the genocide. Sometimes, you know, it was 100 days, but what I have in my head is not even a week. Yeah, so, but I'm grateful that I wasn't, you know, old enough to capture every moment of what was happening in genocide, because my fellow survivors, some of them can't even take it. You know, there's a lot of trauma going on right now, but I was fortunate to be a kid, to be a child, to not capture everything. But I remember the first day of the genocide was on April 7th, in the morning of April 7th. That's when, where I lived in the Eastern Province, that's where the genocide broke in my village. And my grandparents were not there. My grandma used to she used to sell banana beers. That was her production. She did a production selling banana beers. So it was on Thursday. So Thursday was like a farmer's market. So she would go early in the morning, 5 in the morning, she would be gone to do her business. And my grandfather owned a lot of cows. So he always was in the field with the cows and the people that took care of the cows. So they both were not home. It was only my aunt, Agnes, who was my mom's older sister, who was in her late 20s. She wasn't married yet. So she was living with us and other cousins that their parents had fled before because their parents were young and they were the target. So they fled before the genocide. So we were almost like 12 kids in the house and when the genocide broke. And then my aunt Agnes called everyone in the living room early in the morning to sit down on the floor, not even take a peek. She didn't even allow anyone to take a peek in the windows because she was really terrified and she understood what was happening, but she didn't want us children to know what's going on. She had a radio on, like trying to listen where the news, what's going on. But she was very, very scared. I was the last person to come in the living room because my baby brother and I were the youngest there. And she had my baby brother in her back because in Rwanda we carry children
Mm-hmm.
on the backs. Yeah, and she told us we're going to church. It was my favorite activity doing with her when I was a kid. So the first thing came in my head, and she always jokes about that. You can't believe it, but among survivors, some of the stories we joke. We joke that, you know, about some things that we did that was wild and stupid. But I cried for a little dress, a dress that my grandpa bought me before the Christmas previous the genocide, and she got really angry at me, and she told me from then on, if I need anything, she wanted to bring it, put it on me. She told me from then on I should whisper if I need anything from her. So it kind of was thinking in a little bit in what's going on, but I didn't really know. The few feelings that I remember was that when we got out of the house, and I always feel a little shame about this when I remember the feeling I felt, it was excitement. I got excited of what was happening in the streets, but I never told anyone until I'm now in my late 20s. And I understand, you know, it was, you know, I was a child, then I can't really blame my, you know, the little me. But when we got in the street, well, the streets were full of killers. It was full of people who were fleeing, who had been fleeing all night from the capital city. So we lived on a main road that was going to Uganda. So people were fleeing, had been walking all night, carrying a lot of things, you know, like few things they could be able to carry with them. And we joined in. We didn't know where we're going, but I was few steps away. I was separated from everyone who were an attack. So I was separated from my aunt and everyone and my cousins, and I found myself in the home of perpetrators. Yeah.
So your father's experiences had to have been traumatic, to say the least, what was it like for you? What was the feeling for you when you were finally reunited with your father?
Well, I didn't, yeah, so I didn't know my father. I didn't know him. And I was lucky to survive, and my baby brother survived as well. And then we reunite with my family, but my father lost everyone in his family, his parents, his siblings, his nephews. So, and he went to the army, RPF, which was the rebel group that stopped the genocide, probably thinking that he was going to be able to save his family. And I feel like maybe his PTSD has some of that, the guilt of not being able to save his family. But when we reunited, he couldn't take what had just happened to his family. So he became traumatized. And you know, every April, every March, it was another war inside my own home. He didn't accept life, you know, after genocide. It became, you know, I don't know how I can explain it, but it was quite a journey. I grew up in if you can say domestic violence, that I experienced it for so many years, and I didn't even understand a life outside of that. So my mother tried so hard to protect my dad's image. She knew that he was hurt so much. She knew we were the only people that he has left. So she tried so hard to cover and help. And we, as children, end up suffering from that until I was like 12. That's when my mother decided to seek help for my dad separately and help try to raise us and help us not become like my father did become. have a very strong mom. She was very scared that because I'm the one who was able to see a lot of things, and she could see. I had nightmares when I was growing up. I couldn't sleep all night. And she was worrying that what was happening to my dad, it may happen to me as well. And she didn't want to lose both of us. So she decided to take me back where I survived to learn what happened to me, because she wasn't there as well. Yeah, it was quite a journey.
I mean, you know, for you to be separated from your parents, you were just a baby. You were just a baby when you were separated from your parents, and when you were reunited, you were just a little bit older than a baby. You were a young child, right?
Absolutely. I was a young child, and I was so excited because I didn't know what was going on around me, and I was so excited to experience the love of parents for the first time in my life.
Right.
Since birth, but that was not there. They have lost everything, and I was we were asking for the impossible, probably. I don't know, you probably have some similar experiences, maybe, I don't know, but your parents as well, your mom survived.
Yes, no, Dydine, you're absolutely correct. My mother was a survivor from the kinder transports, the children's transports, and sadly for her, she never reunited with her parents. She was taken in by a beautiful family, but there were many, many incidences of children who were separated, and the few that reunited with their parents, it was very traumatic to rebuild that relationship again and to get to know a parent that they never really knew. And in some instances, it included vocabulary. They couldn't even communicate because they didn't speak the same language anymore. So it was a very, very complex, as you know so well, very, very complex situation. And you know, for you growing up, I know the stories from my mother, who spoke little of her past, but for you, what was it like growing up in a family of genocide survivors? How long did it take you all to feel united again and comfortable again and be able to support each other again and communicate again?
I don't, there was no conversations about the feelings about, because in Rwanda, after genocide, the country had to come together right away. So there were people who had been in exile coming back in the country. There were people who lost everything and everyone, like me and my family and my fellow survivors. And there were people being put in jail who had been just committed those crimes. So the country was more like, we have to rebuild this country again, because we were all Rwandans. And the survivors, what happened was there was no time to grieve or to even commemorate the dead or bury their bodies. It was just, it's still happening now. We are still burying the bodies of our people. So there was no time. We had to catch up with the rest of the world. And my mother, I never saw my mom crying for her siblings who were killed during the genocide. My father, during his trauma, that's the only time you will hear something of his feelings, but never in a real life. There was no conversations. I never understood what happened during the genocide until I was 18 years old. And I went to visit a Kigali Genocide Museum. And then for the first time, I understood what happened. The only thing I learned was the pain that my family experienced, I experienced myself, and just it created this anger in me that was towards everyone and everything, which wasn't helpful to me. But there was no conversations, and still it's hard for parents who survived to be able to tell to the children, this is what I went through. The few things I remember was, I think when I was like 7 years old, my dad was having his episodes, and then my mom took me, baby brother and a newborn brother to leave him in the house, to just leave because he was really violent. And that I remember my brother and I, you know, trying to listen to what's going on, the conversations between my parents, and my dad was sobbing, asking my mom that he needs her to stay because he cannot cry, he cannot have enough tears for his family. So it was those, you know, moments that's when we will understand a little bit of their pain. My mom tried so hard to be strong and tell stories, she was very strong, but there were times she couldn't handle it anymore. She would, I think when you have a lot of stress, she lost 2 children, her pregnancies, because of what was happening. And I think on the second child, she changed completely. And that's, you know, there was all those things that those are the conversations. I would say was just the actions of the things that was happening. For me, I feel like I had hope for life when I learned the real history of the country and went to the museum, and seeing that the children who were my age that were killed, there were actual victims that were killed during the genocide, and reading the things that their dreams that they never had the chance to, you know, to live and accomplish. It was the first time I saw my life, the miserable life I had, as an opportunity for me. That was the first time I felt like, this is my life. I am blessed to have a life, even if it's not the greatest, but I'm gonna make most of it. So that's where I had to have conversations within myself, but it was never with my parents, them telling, because I think they were trying to protect us in a way, but it wasn't helping them either. So, you know, I always say most of the survivors of these atrocities or injustices, they've never experienced such a thing before. So they don't even know how to survive after surviving those things. So yeah, we just learn as we go.
You know, yes, Dydine, you're right. There was a time when it was thought that young children who lived through the Holocaust, they thought they weren't old enough to remember what happened. And because it was felt they weren't old enough to remember what happened, they felt that they didn't really suffer the trauma the way the adults did. It was assumed they didn't really suffer the same trauma, and they weren't really considered survivors. And many of the parents or the adults who survived, depending on their circumstances, because they survived, they didn't consider them survivors themselves because they survived. I think it was just many years later when that idea was discredited and it was recognized as it is today, that children who experienced violence and loss and suffered the same post-traumatic symptoms that the adults did. It's been recognized now. I mean, what is your opinion on this?
One of my best friends, her name is Consola. She was 14 years old during the genocide, and she's one of the people that really helped me understand, because when we met, I knew a few stories, few memories that I experienced, but I didn't consider them as a story or as something horrific because I was a child. And I remember meeting her for the first time, and she's like, "No, Dydine, you do have a story. My baby brother was your age when he was killed." And I remember him feeling everything, having comments about everything. And what you went through, you have to admit it to yourself to be able to heal from it. Because when I was having those nightmares when I was a child, I didn't understand where those nightmares were coming from, because I would wake up thinking my dreams were mostly it was mostly genocide. It was everyone around me being killed, but I would see them in the faces of people I know already in my life. So I wake up thinking my mom, my brothers were killed, and I'm just left in their blood. And I will scream all night. My mom will have to come and sleep with me and hold me until I go back to sleep. So those were so many nights, and it was my memories. And I didn't understand it until she took me back to the place where I was separated from everyone. And the woman there, and I didn't even remember all of those things. I just remembered a few things, that funny things or things that were just, I remembered weird things that are not even that important in the story. I will remember me blocking the milk that I asked from the killers to not kill me. And I will ask them if I can drink my milk. I will remember that, but I wouldn't remember all of it. But my mom took me back there where I was, my life was spared. It was a neighbor's house. And at that neighbor's house, when we went there, because I told her I went there because I knew the home, but I didn't remember the details of what happened there. But as we got there, the woman, the wife of the man who saved my life, she was still alive. He had passed away, I think, from a natural death. And when she saw me, she cried. She was a Hutu woman, and her husband was a Hutu as well. The children were perpetrators, and in the home they were slaughtering people in there. So during the genocide, when I separated from my aunt, they lined us all up in the line because they started killing everyone. And they get to me, I asked for milk. Because my mom couldn't understand what happened, why am I having those nightmares? And then I remembered people being killed. I remembered bodies, blood. There are things you can't forget. The stench of the, the blood and all of that. And or you smell something there, and it takes you directly back to those days. But I remember the woman saying that her husband, one thing he wished was to see me, because he didn't know that I survived. He saved they killed everyone that was there, and when they got to me, I asked for milk, because I had a jar of milk that my aunt gave me before we left the house, and she gave everyone a little something to drink or to eat, because she didn't know how long that journey is going to be, or if it's going to end. So I had the jar of milk with me, and then when they about to kill me, I felt thirst, and I asked if I can drink my milk. So when I posed to drink my milk, they posed, instead of killing me right away, they started mimicking me, making fun of me, really loud. And this elderly man heard from inside in the house. He was in the house, and he walked to see why those perpetrators were not doing their job, because they used to call it work. And then he saw me in the line, and he recognized me because he knew my grandparents, they were neighbors, and he rushed and saved me, and he put me between his legs, and they killed everyone else. So I think those memories of seeing that as a child, it never left me. And yeah. So even though I didn't capture everything when I was growing up, but every time she would tell the stories, and I would go back directly and remember every person that was there. So I think children do, I don't know how old you have to be able to capture all those things, but for myself, those are things that cannot
indelibly in your mind. They're indelibly in your mind. And for myself and for the audience, we thank you for sharing this with us. It's not the easiest thing, and I applaud you, and really, but yet there's a certain light around you. You're like such a joyful, charismatic, wonderful woman, and so positive. I wish I could give you a tissue, but
I know I should have.
I cry all the time as well. How are you able to achieve the way you are. You're so positive and so alive, and I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. I think for me, my dad was the victim of those horror, and I saw his pain, and I always wanted to live a free life where I don't have that pain, because I saw how much it hurt him. It still does, and I knew that I had to be there for my siblings. I had to be there for where my parents were not able to be, and I tried so hard to understand why people would do such a thing. And I tried to learn from people who went through the same things, how they overcame it. I knew that my mind is everything for me, and I have to work on it. I didn't really know how I got here, because I wasn't always this, smiling person. But little by little, for me, just understanding, I think when I understood that life, it starts where I am, whatever happened, but I didn't have power over it. But in this moment, I have the choice to lead a life I want. And I would do my best to to heal my mind, because I believe we give what we have. So I don't want to give to the world what I received when I was a child. So how am I going to work on myself to not be always angry and have so much hatred towards everyone? And just, knowing that I have both the light and darkness in me. I can choose which one I grow more. So it's really a journey that I'm still learning. I'm still working on myself, and I don't know if the learning is gonna end, but yeah.
And you're a wise lady, taking the path of light, taking the light, the path of lightness. But many Holocaust survivors don't speak about their experiences, and my mother was one of them, actually. And for many reasons, some, like my mother, felt guilty that they survived while their family members didn't. And many, like my mother again, didn't want to burden their children with the weight of their memories and experiences. When did you start to speak about your experiences during the genocide? And why did you feel that you wanted to share your story? Because it's clearly a hugely difficult thing to do.
I don't think I ever chose to do it. When I started, I didn't choose to do it. I was very interested in human rights. I wanted to understand why people hurt each other. I wanted to understand the emotion that comes from that. And I loved storytelling. I loved writing. When I was growing up, my only way of sharing my emotions was singing or writing it, because I'm an introvert. So I didn't know how to communicate my feelings. And when I graduated from high school, I wanted to understand what the children of perpetrators are going through, because I didn't quite understand. I'm going through this because my parents survived. How is it for the child who's from a family that committed those crimes? How are they feeling? And there was a lot of shame that those kids were carrying, not even wanting to be known that they come from that side of the family. And the more I learned that, the more I got really interested in understanding youth in my country, what they're experiencing. And I became a filmmaker doing documentaries, and I would travel around the country interviewing people. And those people were from different backgrounds, the people who committed genocide, the people the women who were teenagers, because most of the young women who survived the genocide were teenage girls before they they will rape, if they survived, most of the perpetrators raped those young women. There was a lot of HIV going on in the country, a lot of children born out of rape during the genocide. So there was a lot of youth when I was growing up that had these stories that they don't even want anyone to know. And then I learned all of that in my early 20s, and then that's when I was appointed as a youth peace ambassador, and that was part of my job, to understand the youth within my country, which was really educating for me. And then I was invited here to Los Angeles to talk about those programs. But when I was talking about those programs, people will ask me about my personal stories. And I will respond, but it was very uncomfortable for me because I didn't want to really talk about it. And then I meet my friend Console. She's like, "No, Dydine, you have to share your story." And I'm like, "No, I don't know if I can do it." And then I started sharing a little by little the history of the country, because that's what I trained myself in, learning the history of my country. But at some point I said, you know what? It's uncomfortable for me to respond to these questions because I'm not a beautiful crier. I am really an ugly crier. So I didn't like that part, being on a stage and doing all of that, crying on the stage. And I said, I should just write it. Right, that's where my comfort is. It's writing everything I feel and what I know. So that's how I wrote the book. It was when I came here the summer of 2014, and I started writing into 2015, and I published on 2016. So my yes. So my goal was, if I want to be able to share my story to the world, but this is my way of sharing it through the book. So I sat down and write the book, and that's when most of my healing journey really started, because I had to understand. And when I was writing, that's when I could feel everything, and asking my mom's questions and my fellow survivors' questions. That's when really my healing kind of began, and it was almost like a therapeutic thing I did for myself. But what was my agenda was to not talk about my story, but then the book actually made it more that I speak to things that I even thought I was gonna speak about, because I put my life out there. So that's how I ended up in public speaking and sharing, and especially with young people. I see it's so important for them to learn these stories. And I loved connecting with young people. I can see myself in them. And it's just in the way the response from them, mostly the response I got was what encouraged me even more to keep doing, to keep sharing my story, and building my life to become more than myself, so that I inspire other kids who are, going through the same thing.
Well, I certainly feel inspired by you, and I'm sure everybody that listens to you is feeling very inspired. And I have one more question for you before we turn it over to the audience. And
Sure.
that's, if there is one message that you would want audiences and the visitors to the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust to take away from your book or your talk, what would that be?
I have this. I like this. In my memoirs, I think it's page 268. Is towards the end. That's where I share a message, and I like this message because it speaks to everyone in the world. I believe we're all the same. We're all humans. We're all looking for happiness. It's just sometimes we look at it in the wrong way or the right way, but we all want to be happy. But life is a choice. We should never resort to name calling when we refer to others that we perceive as different from ourselves. Whatever color, religion, ethnicity, or tribe you are, or what part of the world you're from, there's only one race, the human race. All that matters is what is inside you, and hate is not the answer. There might be a shadow in your life, I do not know what your personal tragedy might be, but I want to tell you that what happened has happened. What matters is what you do now and what you do next. Our individual light can become so bright that in our presence, darkness disappears. And we all have that, right? I've learned that we cannot do for others what we cannot do for ourselves. By nourishing the light within ourselves, we find strength we never knew was there. So that would be the message I will leave to you.
And that is one big... Dydine, thank you. We're going to open up to the audience, and I'm looking at a few questions here, okay? The first question I have here is from someone who's saying that he or she studied the Rwandan genocide in college and remember being affected by it. And that he or she is saying that they would love to visit Rwanda and pay tribute. How do Rwandans feel about tourists coming to the country mainly to visit the genocide sites?
I personally, I feel it's the most beautiful thing to do for anyone anywhere in the world. There are sites in every city in Rwanda, because the genocide happened 3 months, but every city started genocide because it was really planned and really well. It was planned really well that every serial killer in every city started killing the same day. So there are a lot of memorials around the country, and it's really educating to go to these memorials, and it's open to everyone to come and visit and learn the history. And there's a lot of I like that there's exhibit of all the genocide around the world. So then I got to learn that genocide did not just happen in Rwanda. So you can visit. There's a lot of orphanages. There's a lot you can see in Rwanda. There's really educating, and that brings peace within. And you can see when these atrocities are coming nearby, so you can be able to prevent it. So I feel like learning those histories around the world, what happened, it helps for you to see when it coming to your home, to be able to prevent it before it happens. So you can definitely visit. And well, there's a pandemic going on right now. I don't know if you can be able to travel, but once all this is over, it's definitely a life-changing experience if you're able to do it.
And a question for one of our audience participants is, can you explain how the genocide ended?
Sure. The genocide, how it ended. So in 1994, I think there was, I don't know if it's Somalia, that the American soldiers were killed in Somalia or something. I don't remember well, but what happened, the whole world stood still, and no one did nothing. And that's why in only 100 days, over 1 million people were killed. Literally the people who, the rebel group, the RPF, is the one that stopped the genocide. And there were not even that many of they did not have a lot of soldiers. But when they came in fighting with a Hutu government and Interahamwe Hutu militias, they fled. The Hutus who were killers fled the country. I feel like they were scared, because they would have outnumbered the soldiers, the Tutsi RPF soldiers. They would have outnumbered them easily, but I guess because of what they had done and the blood they had shed, they fled. So they fled to neighboring countries, and RPF took over the country and rescued a lot of survivors who were wounded, because during the genocide they used a lot of traditional weapons, machetes, and there was this hammer they created, and they put nails in it. They used them like really horrific things. So there was a lot of people were physically wounded, and So the RPF, they had to put together places to save these lives. But in 19, a friend of mine, a survivor friend of mine, we were talking about this the other day, because in 1997, 98, there were still attacks from Hutu militias who were in Congo. They would still come and burn buses in Rwanda. They burned my primary school where I used to go to school, because the country was still rebuilding. I can't believe now I live in Los Angeles and I went to a tent. Like my school was a tent, you know, like, have you been at refugee camps? So the whole country pretty much was like a refugee camp for survivors, because it had burned our homes and everything. But the genocide itself stopped in July, I think July 2nd. That's when the RPF won the war with the Hutu militias. But the killings continued. There was a lot of those attacks that came from Hutu militias who were in exile. But then I think it took also time for UN to recognize that it was a genocide. So there was still a lot of things happening, and but the actual genocide ended in July. I think July 2nd or July 4th, I don't remember. Well, he cut me, whoever asked the question cut me off guard, but it's online.
Okay. So I think we have time for 2 more questions. And the next question is, your experiences as a child is different from what your parents and other adults experienced. How do you feel about movies like Hotel Rwanda? Do they make it more real? Does it make you understand what your parents might have experienced, or is it just Hollywood fiction?
I feel like, well, movies have to have heroes, you know, like Hollywood, it's a Hollywood movie. But for me, it doesn't even say, it doesn't even give 25% of what happened. Mm-hmm. So I believe that if Hollywood had decided to do a movie, 100% of what happened, no one would have been able to sit in the theater and watch it and finish the movie. So they probably had to, you know, to make it in a way it brings awareness of what happened in Rwanda. For me, I'm grateful for the movie, because at least it shed a little light to what happened, and a lot of people found out about the genocide because of that movie. And yet, yes, they didn't get enough information, but it was a spark that they going to learn more and find out more of what happened to the genocide in Rwanda. But the movie, it wouldn't do enough justice to what really happened. And yeah, if you want to really learn about what happened, I feel like museums, documentaries, there's some other good movies that you can see. I think Sometimes in April, that's also another good movie that was not, it did not get too much I think publicity or I don't know, but that movie shades more light to what happened, brings more awareness. But the Hotel Rwanda, it didn't. Yeah, it's a good movie to watch, but it didn't really give a full,
right.
Yeah, a full understanding of what happened in Rwanda.
Okay. We've got 1 more question. There's a host of questions, but the next question is a thank you from one of our audience members. Thank you for your wonderful, enlightening conversation.
Oh, thank you.
And the message is, I'm curious to hear if in Rwanda there is a conversation and an ongoing teaching about it in schools and among young people and state media.
I've been here now almost 6 years now. So, but when I was still in Rwanda, it was, from my experience, it was really hard for teachers to be able to teach the subject on the genocide, because that teacher, that professor has to come from one tribe or another. So, and the students were from, were all mixed up. They don't, you know, recruit children from, they don't like separate survivors and perpetrators, returnees. You know, we're all in the same class, and we have this one professor who's going to teach this history. So it was hard for the professors to know, to not be on either side, to be able to teach the history the way it happened without having sides. So I didn't really learn it in school until I went to the museum to learn it from, not from my teachers, because it's hard to teach your own history and not be on either side. So I think the Rwandan government is working on a curriculum where they will have a fixed curriculum that they can be able to teach kids what happened in Rwanda. But there are a lot of programs. They select students, like the same program I went in, they were selecting students around the country who are students who are influential to go visit and learn and then come back and teach other students. So, but it's really hard to teach history. It's like here in America, you know, most of the kids don't know the American history. And I tend to see that a lot. And since I've been here, I've been learning a lot of American history. And sometimes I ask questions the kids don't know. And I'm like, come on.
So Dydine, before I ask you the last question for this session, and share a very special message that you've received from someone I think you know well, can I just ask you if you could possibly repeat the title of the movie that you recommend?
It's called Sometimes in April. Sometimes
in April.
In April, yes.
So,
I think Idris Elba stars in it as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And, yeah. And the last question is, what are some of the dangerous examples of othering that causes you concern in our world today? And this person says, thank you so much for sharing your story with all of us.
Oh, thank you. The concerning thing, I think there's so much work to do to bring peace. And I think peace starts within and then spreads it to the neighbors. But there's a lot of, you know, hatred going on. There's a lot of genocides going on right now. And it's concerning because sometimes we forget that there's more love in the world than hatred. It's just that hatred is more louder. And I think when people have so much hate, they tend to share it louder than when people have so much love within. They don't really take the time to share it openly. And I guess it's love is shy. I don't know if love is shy and vulnerable, but we can try to make it stronger. And if we feel love towards somebody, just to let them know, to say out loud. There is a lot. Yeah, it's the world is, I don't know, but I don't know what. That's a very tough question right now, because I'm just like, you know, nobody. I don't know how. From nowhere, so I'm like, I can't fix the entire world, but I feel like the only way of doing it is really starting within, working on ourselves, and then help family, help somebody, give to as many people as you can, because you receive at the end of the day. I realize the more you give, the more you receive. Just, you know, doing our best, but the world is really large. And but if you are a survivor, a Holocaust survivor, actually a friend of mine told me one thing that helps me every day. Maybe I hope it will help somebody else out there. She told me that if you kill one life, you've killed the entire world. And if you save one life, you've saved the entire world. So if we have that understanding of, if I hurt one person, know that you've hurt the world, and then change it into helping one person, that knowing that if you helped one human being, you've helped the entire world. I feel like that's the only way we can help, you know, our world be a little better. I don't know. I'm just Dydine, you know.
I think you're a very, very wise lady, and we have a lot to learn from you. But I would like to share a special message you have from, I think, your dear friend Constantly.
Oh, yes.
I am so proud of you, my soul sister. You are a light. And I can't imagine a better way of ending this talk by saying on behalf of all of us, you are a light, a bright light that shines over all of us. And we thank you. You're an inspiration to all of us. And we thank you for being with us. And we treasure what the words that you have shared with us this morning. So thank you. And for the audience, for any of you or all of you who would like to receive Dydine's book. It's called Embracing Survival, and it's available on Amazon and from other booksellers. And there she is showing it. Thank you for showing it. Once more, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dydine. And before we sign off, I'd like you to know that while the museum is closed, we are regularly providing virtual programs. And next Tuesday, May 26, would you please join us for a talk by Holocaust survivor Michele Gold. And on June the 2nd, the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust, along with HIAS, H-I-A-S, the UCLA Lead Center for Jewish Studies, and 30 years after, will host a conversation about the role played by several waves of Jewish refugees in shaping contemporary Los Angeles. For further information and for any information about our virtual events, please visit our website at lamoth.org. Thank you all so much. And Dydine, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.